asked 5 questions at the beginning of the Bible. What were those 5 questions?
First question is, why does it say command?
What does it say? Veata tetzave should say?
It should say that Hashem
Tzav. Okay. Second question.
Why does it sound like also Moshe is the source of the command?
Right, the content. Moshe seems to be the commander. Okay, that's the second question. Third question is the first paragraph of the Mimer. That's why.
Giving oil to Moshe when Aaron's lighting over there.
Beautiful. Moshe, what's the fourth question?
Fourth question is, why is it Lamar instead of Laha'ir?
Fair. Why does it say Kassis Lamar instead of Kassis Laha'ir? Fifth question, time. Our pasuk says there, Tommy, the next pasuk says Erev V'Baker. Okay, what's the answer to the first 2 questions?
That's tetzave in Aramaic is
Not Aramaic.
Another way of translating
Let
it.
him talk. Not in Aramaic. Yes, we brought a word tzavta, but the word mitzaveh can also mean connection. Fair.
In there. That word's Aramaic, right?
Tzavta is Aramaic, but there's in modern Hebrew there's an equivalent tzevet, which is a crew, a bunch of people who work together. Okay, so what's pshat in the pasuk?
That Moshe connects us.
Moshe connects Jewish people in Ein Sof. You're fair. Okay, next question. Why do we bring the oil to Moshe? Not the full answer, just the basic answer we get at the beginning. That what?
It elevates him as well.
That somehow we bring something to him that elevates him. We find out much later in the Mimer what that's all about. Right? And why Kassis Laha'ir, not Kassis Laha'ir?
Because the Neshama is bring the light to the souls. Because the souls are the luminaries.
You didn't convince me. If I didn't know what it meant, I still don't. What's Kassis and what's Ma'or?
Kassis is crushing.
Okay, so what's the crushing in the way the Rebbe explained it to us?
The crushing is the situation that one's in.
Okay, yeah, but I mean, what you're saying is true, but it's called Gullus, right? And you have to say that, right? That the crushedness of Gullus brings about
pure, brighter light.
No, it's not what it brings about. Ma'or is not light at all.
It's the luminary.
Okay, so what does it bring about? Amnon, what does it bring about?
An elevation for Moshe?
A what?
An elevation for Moshe?
That was V'Koilecha. What is Kassis Lamar? Moshe.
That's the Lord brings about a revelation of Etzim Neshama.
Etzim Neshama, not the light, the other Rebbe. Ma'or is the luminary, the source of light. In other words, the crushedness of Gullus brings about the revelation of the essence of the soul, and that's expressed in Mesiras Nefesh. This is how we understand the beginning of the Mimer. We're going to get a much deeper understanding of all this, but these are the answers to the question. And then the last question is not answered until the very end of the Mimer, so we won't answer it. So noise base. Noise base, the Rebbe explains much of what you guys just said, right? That the lashon of tetzave is tzavta v'chibur, a language of joining together, and that's pshat in Veata tetzave, that Moshe connects the Jewish people to Ein Sof, and by virtue of this, he affects the Jewish people. They bring about an elevation in Moshe, and that's v'yichoi lecha, right? And that's what the Rebbe explains in Ois base, relatively quickly. Ois gimel. Now the Rebbe's. Now, of course, this is all based on the Friedrich Rebbe's Mimer, right? Then the Rebbe explains that, before he explains that idea in the Mimer, the Friedrich Rebbe explains the idea of Raya Mehemna, right? And there are 2 different pshatim in Raya Mehemna. What are the 2 different pshatim in Raya Mehemna?
Shepherd of faith and faithful shepherd.
Shepherd of faith and faithful shepherd, right? The Rebbe actually puts them in a different order because we're going to deal with the shepherd of faith, not at all with faithful shepherd. Right? The faithful shepherd, the one who the people can count on to take care of them. Shepherd of faith, what does that mean, shepherd of faith? Every Jew is a believer. So what does that mean, shepherd of faith?
He nourishes their faith.
Beautiful. He nourishes the emunah. We're going to find that out later, right? Exactly what that means and what does that mean he nourishes our emunah?
Internalize our
according to-
Beautiful. It internalizes our emunah. B'diuk. We bring it into our conscious state. Because emunah is a koyach makif. It can remain something somewhat residual, and to bring it into Pneumius, that's the Indian of Moshe Rabbeinu. All right? And that's the Indian of every Moshe in every generation. The leader of the Jewish people in every generation is that, like Mordechai, who was the expression of Moshe in his generation. All right? The Frierdiker Rebbe immediately goes to Mordechai, and Mordechai is the one who galvanized the Jewish people to bring them to a state of Mesiras Nefesh. Right? And we see even we know there's an Ispashtus of Moshe in every generation. We know that from the Zohar, but the Rebbe actually quotes the Medrash, which talks about the idea of Mordechai being Mordechai B'derek and Moshe B'derek. Okay? At the end of Ois Gimel, the Rebbe asks, we have to understand the connection of the idea of Kassis Lamar to the idea of Raya Mehemla. Right? See the last three lines in Ois Gimel. V'tzarech lahavin ha'shaychus da'perish b'kosis lamar l'mavur ba'maimer lifnei zeh, that which is brought in the Maimer before this, before Kosis lamar, the fact that Moshe and the Spashtus of Moshe in every generation, zan and farnes es emuna. Okay. Seder? So that's the question we're left with at the end of Gimel. You know, it's Dalet, the Rebbe talks about the advantage of the Kabbalah Torah at the time of Purim as opposed to the Kabbalah Torah at the time of Matan Torah. And what's the basic advantage? Mesiras Nefesh, right? That at Purim there was an expression of tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, which means that the Kabbalah Torah came from below, whereas at the time of Matan Torah it was all based on the revelation from above. Right? Okay, so that's the basic the basic idea in Dalet. But at the end of Dalet, in that paragraph L'chu'ura, let's read it because maybe asks a question that's going to take us into the next step in the Maimer, right? Because the question that we asked at the end of Gimel wasn't so much the connection of Kassis Lamar to Raya Mahemda. That's going to be the more specific question now. The question at the end of Gimel was the relevance of Kassis Lamar to the idea of internalizing emunah. That was the question at the end of Gimel. Now the Rebbe is going to ask the question about the connection of Kassis Lamar to Raya Mahemda and the order in which the Frierdiker Rebbe discusses them. So let's just see L'chura at the end of Ois Dalet. In L'chura Yesh Leimer, Shaperish B'Kassis Lamar, this explanation of Kassis Lamar, and what does that mean? Shal Yedei Kassis, by virtue of the crushedness, Nishbar V'Nitker, Magim Lamar, we reach the luminary of the soul, the essence of the soul. Hu beer, that's an explanation based on the fact that specifically at the time of a decree, difficult times in Golas, Baal Mesiras Nefesh, B'Ifan comes to a higher level of Mesiras Nefesh. Why? Because Mesiras Nefesh he mitzad etzem and neshama. Shelamayna migilui, the ultimate expression of Mesiras Nefesh is coming from the essence of the soul, beyond any state of revealed reality in the soul, which we will see in Ois Hey, different levels of the source of the emunah in the soul. The ma'or, the luminary, Shimon Nimsar, that the or comes from, but it's higher than or. Val Yudesha Hayuaz b'matzav de Kosis, and since at the time of Purim they were in a state of crushedness, these galets and the neshama ma'or. So there's a revelation of ma'or. Oh, so that's the basic explanation that we said in Ois Dalet. Now the Rebbe asks, but if you look at the Maimer, the Frierdiker Rebbe, the order of things in the Maimer, the Hemshech v'Seder in Yomim, Ba'Maimer, based on the order of things in the Maimer, Shahapeidush b'Kosis Lamar, the explanation of those words, Kosis Lamar, Ba comes la'achrei inyan de Raya Mahemda, after the explanation of Raya Mahemda. So that seems to indicate, mashma, the inyan Kosis Lamar, that the whole notion of the crushedness bringing about a revelation of etzem and neshama is shaykh, is relevant. Gam also l'zeh Meisha zan in front of says emunah shteva pnimi is also shaykh to Meisha. So we understand how the crushedness of Gullus can bring about a revelation of Mara, and that's expressed in Mesiras Nefesh. What's that got to do with Raya Mahemda? That's the Rebbe's question at the end of Dalet, and that begins the discussion of Hey, Vav, Zayin, and Ches, which ties up the whole mimer of the Frierdiker Rebbe. So in Ois Hey, what does the Rebbe talk about? Two different levels of Emunah, two different sources of Emunah. What are the two sources of Emunah?
Das and Mesiris Nefesh.
Those are the expressions of Emunah, not the sources of Emunah. Mazli Chazi, Yefeh, beautiful. Mazli Chazi, that the soul sees Elokus. Right now, our soul there's an aspect of our soul, Chayish Benefesh, that is in Olam HaAtzilus, and it's experiencing Elokus. Right? That's a problem because I'm not there, I'm here. But it's happening. And another level of source of Emunah, Etzem, beautiful, the essence of the soul. Right? Oh, so that's what the Rebbe explains in Hay. And he explains the advantage of Etzem. What's the advantage of Etzem?
Is it can be expressed here.
It doesn't
Why? Because the essence of something is the essence of every level of it. At this point, we're saying this in a general sense. We're going to get more particular later in the Maimon, but different levels of Etzem. Okay, at this point, we're saying it generally. So then the Rebbe says, based on this, these two different levels of Emunah, two different sources of Emunah, we can understand the connection between Raya Mehemna and Kasis Lamar. That what does Moshe do? Moshe connects us to the essence of our soul, and therefore our Emunah will come not from the level of Mazli Chazi, but rather from the level of Etzem. And that will be the essential expression of that will be Mesiris Nefesh. That's what we say at the end of Hay. Right? So when you go through the Maimer again, you realize just how much you learn at the end.
Really? That the essential expression of that is Mesiris Nefesh?
The essential expression of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama is Mesiris Nefesh.
Even in function?
Yeah, but 100%. Right? Moshe himself didn't have to do that, but that is the essential expression of that revelation. By Moshe, it's true, it was Das, but the rest of that Rebbe hasn't told us that yet. Right? He hasn't made that distinction. Right? Right? And that's what the Rebbe continues in Vav. Right? That the Emunah Yisrael U'Ba'efen Shehu Moshe Nafshel Zeh, right? The fact that the Emunah produces Mesiris Nefesh, Hu Be'ikr Be'emunah Shmitzad Etzem and Neshama. That's essentially Emunah that comes from Etzem and Neshama. Right? That's what the Rebbe says in the beginning of Vav. Right? Then the Rebbe explains. Based on this, what can we explain? That Moshe is the expression of Moshe as Raya Mehemna, and Moshe's ability to connect the Jews to the essence of their soul. This is expressed in Moshe in every single generation. And again, the most powerful expression of that is that he strengthens their emunah that they'll stand in a state of Mesiris Nefesh. Now, Moshe himself, the Rebbe says, this is where the Rebbe makes the distinction between Moshe and Mordechai. Moshe himself didn't bring the people to a state of Mesiris Nefesh because it wasn't necessary. So what was Moshe all about? Das. Moshe was all about internalizing the essential connection to the Eibishter. That was Moshe's Aveda. So Moshe's generation was called the Dor Deya. Did they have to express that in Mesiris Nefesh? No, there was no need to be Mesiris Nefesh in their generation. Were they still very powerfully connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu? Absolutely. And how did that express itself? A conscious awareness of godliness in everything they did, right? Which was a result of their connection to the essence of their soul. That was Moshe's generation, right? But here the Rebbe said something extremely important, and we'll have to read the words, right? In the middle of the paragraph. Al pi hanal yesh leimar. See that right before the word in a different font, she'ikr. Al pi hanal yesh leimar. She'ikr inyan de Raya Mehemna. The essential idea of Raya Mehemna, the shepherd of faith, who zeshu zan and farnesis emuna atzma. This is where the Rebbe right, about the Chiddush that Moshe nourishes the Emunah. He doesn't nourish us with Emunah, he nourishes our Emunah, which means that the Emunah comes from Etzem and Neshama. That the Emunah will not only be mitzad the fact that our Neshama sees Elokus above, which is what it says in the brackets, right? Ella, skipping the brackets, mitzad Etzem and Neshama, it comes from the essence of the soul. Okay, so then what? Since we're connected to Etzem, so then what are two results of that? One is it comes into Pnimius, Das, that's by Mesha. What's the other result of that? Mesiras Nefesh. But those are results. It's not that Mesha Shabador, it's not Mesha himself, because Mesha didn't do this, right? It's not that Mesha is the one that brings us to Mesiras Nefesh. Mesha connects us to the essence of who we are, which Memela results in Mesiras Nefesh. The Totza'ah, the result of that is Mesiras Nefesh. What's Mesha about? Nourishing our Emunah. Not nourishing us with Emunah. The diuk of the Rebbe was very, very powerful. Nourishing our Emunah, which means connecting us to Etzem and Neshama. Therefore, the result of that is certain behavior, right? So in the generation of Moshe Rabbeinu, what's the result? Unbelievably powerful conscious connection to godliness. How is that expressed in other generations of the Jewish people? Mesiras Nefesh. We're going to see it's also expressed in this thing called Kosis Lamar, but we're not going to get to that until Ois Tas Yud, right? At this point, it doesn't exist. Okay.
I'm not sure if it says this explicitly in the Bible, but did Moshe's generation not reach a state of Mesiras Nefesh just because that generation didn't call for it? If it would have come, they would have?
Absolutely, 100%. There's no necessity for it. That's why there's Zion, was the Rebbe say, that again, we're going to go back to the fact that the Iker expression of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama is Mesiras Nefesh, and therefore Mordechai was more Moshe than Moshe himself in that regard. Only in that regard, but in that regard. Right? Okay. Right. Now that doesn't mean you wouldn't notice this incredible connection to Elokus that Moshe's generation had. I'm sure if you talk to these people, they were quite astounding people, right? Yes, they made a few mistakes, okay, right? But especially the second generation, they were really quite astounding. Right? The mistakes were all made in the first year and a half. Right? It's when all of those stories in Bamidbar that are hard to understand, that was all the first year and a half. Right after that, people were had somehow internalized things more powerfully, and we're in quite an amazing place, right? And the second generation ultimately made it into Eretz Yisrael, and were then the ones who went to fight. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu is be'etzem dordeya. Mordechai brings the Yidden to a state of Mesiras Nefesh. So there's Zion, the Rebbe says at the end that actually, in that sense, then he's quoting Friedrich Rebbe, that Mordechai is more Moshe than Moshe himself relative to that particular detail in Raya Mehemna, Mesiras Nefesh. It wasn't necessary for Moshe to bring his generation to that state. Then at the end of that, the Rebbe says the interesting line about the Friedrich Rebbe paskening relative to Mordechai, therefore he's paskening relative to himself. Right? That was Zion. Right? In Ches, so then the Rebbe explains the connection of everything in the mind, right? Right? That why does the Friedrich Rebbe explain Raya Mehemna before he explains Kosis Lamar? Because Raya Mehemna is that which brings about the revelation in the Jew of their essential connection to the Eibishter, which results in Kosis Lamar. Right? And that's the order of things in the Maimer, the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, right? Okay, Seder. That takes us to the next question, and that's the second half of the Maimer. Okay, we've explained the order of things in the Friedrich Rebbe's Maimer, but what's missing?
The last question? Oh, no, the order.
No, not yet. That's also missing. That's true.
That
What's Veyicho Elecha doing in between the Veata tetzave b'nei Israel? You are the Raya Mehemna who connect the Jewish people to the essence of their soul, you nourish their emunas, or their emunas coming from the essence of their soul, and therefore they are very powerfully connected to a Kadosh Baruch Hu. That will result in the serious nefesh kasis lama'or. What's v'yichoy lecha doing in the middle? That's a pshat in the pasuk, not a pshat in the mimer. The mimer, we've dealt with the Friedrich Rebbe's mimer, why he explains things in the order he does. Right now, the question was the pasuk itself. What's v'yichoy lecha? And basically, the whole rest of the mimer explains that. Right? Now, it gets into all sorts of unbelievable ideas other than that, but all of that is meant to explain what's v'yikoy lecha, which ends up being our avodah, which brings us from the state of Mesiras Nefesh to the state of Kasis Lamar. That's our avodah. Moshe Rabbeinu will take us to the state of Mesiras Nefesh. We can get to the state of Kasis Lamar through our own avodah. That's not coming. It's coming from the keiches that Moshe gives us, but we're using those keiches in our own avodah. That's coming from below. That's what the Rebbe explains. So the tzarech lahavin at the end of Ches is, now we have to explain the pasuk. All right? Okay. In his test, the Rebbe explains that amazing idea about, reveals to us a whole new pshat in the Megillah, that there are two different aspects of Kabbalah Torah in the Megillah. There's the Kabbalah Torah at the time of the decree, that's the Mesiras Nefesh, but it's also a simple pshat. The Kibbul Yehudim is written after the miracle, so there must be some level of Kibbul Yehudim after the miracle, right? Which is not a function of Mesiras Nefesh, because after all, there's no need for Mesiras Nefesh anymore. We did it, we won, we're on top. Things are good, right? Oh, and what did the Rebbe say? Well, those two levels can also be understood relative to Kasis Lamar. There's the Kasis Lamar at the time of the Gezer, and that we will later call, but we can call it now for us, Mesiras Nefesh. And then there's the level of Kasis Lamar when things were good. And what's that? So the Rebbe focuses on that more than on the union of Kabbalah Torah. That comes up a little later, but very quickly. That what? There's two different levels happening in the story of Purim. There's the level of Mesiras Nefesh at the time of the Gezerah, right? And that is the Jew is crushed by the situation in Golus. But there's an even higher level. And the Jew is crushed not by the situation of Golus, because now the situation is good. Not only is it good, but there's been a level of Ishafcha, that the Beis Haman has become the house of Esther. So things are very good, but we're still enslaved by Achashverosh, we're still his servants, and therefore we're still in Golus, and the Jew is crushed by the essential existence of Golus, not by the situation in Golus. And that's the level that we're now calling Kasis Lamar. We haven't distinguished between Mesiras Nefesh and Kasis Lamar as clearly yet, but that distinction is what we've made. Right? The level of Mesiras Nefesh and the level of Kasis Lamar. Okay. Right? And what is it that causes the Jew to be so crushed by the very essential existence of Golus? Top of page Kuf Lamed Hey. What's that? Where's that coming from?
And a simple question.
That what?
That we're still in goals itself?
Yeah, why? Why is that crushed the Jew? What's the essential desire of the Jew?
Because we
That
want to
Hashem-
Wait, hold on 1 second. Yeah?
Jews exactly Hashem's avodah, because if when we go, we can't.
That's a good idea, but it's not what the Rebbe says in the Mimer. The Rebbe says there's something that bothers us. What bothers us?
Hashem's not revealed.
Hashem's not revealed. That's what the Rebbe says. Hashem's not revealed. That's the Ratzon, the panini of every single Jew is that the Eibusher should be revealed in Elam Hazeh, and the fact that the Eibusher is not revealed in Elam Hazeh bothers the Yid. Now it only bothers him if he cares about the Eibusher. Right? It's not going to bother him if he doesn't care about the Eibusher. What's he going to be bothered by if he doesn't care about the Eibusher? His own avodah. Where am I holding? How am I doing? Right? How's my learning? How's my davening? Am I doing this right? Am I doing that right? That'll be what bothers him. Right? That doesn't have to bother him so he's depressed. That's what he'll think about all day. But what if he somehow touches a deeper place in himself and connects to a deeper place in himself? What will bother him? Something relative to the Eibusher, not something relative to himself. Right? That part relative to himself is a good part of himself. It's his avodah, it's his spirituality. Beseder is still him. Right? But where can he get? He can get to a place of what bothers him is the Eibusher situation, right? Because the Eibusher doesn't have a house, that bothers him. But the Eibusher is homeless, right? And that crushes the Jew. So all the Jew can think about is giving the Eibusher the B'tachtoni, bring about a revelation of the Eibusher in Elam Hazeh. The word that's used to explain that, but it's unfortunately a 4-letter word, is Mashiach. People get very nervous when you say that word. Oh, the M word. Yeah, the world's all about that. Creation was all about that. That's what the Eibishter wants. That's what the Eibishter means. It's all about that. Coming in Mashiach, right? So, say it. That's what it's about. So you can just say it in other words if people are nervous about that word. Why they're nervous about that word, I don't know. They've got some hang-ups. Right? I remember once being interviewed by, it was a whole long story, but anyway, so I was asked if I'm a fundamentalist in the interview. So the interviewer was a pro. This guy named Bob Simon. It was an interview for 60 minutes, so he was a pro. He knew how to win. He knew how to interview. He knew how to get you to say what he wanted you to say. The job was to not say what he wants you to say, but to say what you want to say, which is hard when you're facing a pro. So she said, "Are you fundamentalist?" So I don't know where this came from, but it was one of the best things I ever said. I mean, it's just like I said, fundamentalism is the longest four-letter word in the English language. It's a dirty word. So he said, "What do you mean?" I said, "I think most Americans have a fundamental belief in democracy. Does that mean they're fundamentalists?" Because of course he was trying to compare me to Iranians. Right? Does that mean they're fundamentalists? So he smiled. By this time we were very close. My wife and I were sitting at the table with the camera over there, and Bob Simon there, and the producer sitting on the stairs, all Jews. So Simon said, "Wow, that is a good answer. I'm not touching that with a 10-foot pole. I cannot put that on American television, but that was a really good answer." That's what he said. Because you're betting film for 4 hours and about 5 minutes of it shows up. Right? So you have to be very careful what you say. Right? And if you don't like what you're saying, they taught us. It was very interesting. They taught us what to do. If you don't like, a friend of mine was the Chabad liaison to the foreign media, so they wanted to do this thing. So I was the one that used to do these things for Chabad in Eretz Yisrael. So they taught us how to do this. And what do you do? It's very interesting. If you're being interviewed live, you can't do it, but you're not live. Right? So let's say you're starting to say something, you're going somewhere where you don't want to go, which can happen, right? You sort of, so you just go, blah, 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 blah. You just wreck the take. They can't use it. Right? You're not live. You can do whatever you want. Right? So every now and then my wife would kick me under the table, like, don't go there. Right? I'd kick her, don't go there. And we just go, bah, bah, bah. He'd look at us, he'd laugh. He liked us. Came later with his wife to visit us. We became friends. Right? And then unfortunately he died in a traffic accident on the West Side Highway, which is really chaval. He's a very, very interesting Jew. Big left-winger, mindless left-winger. Right? But, he was mindless. In terms of that, he was mindless. Not in terms of everything. But he was the CBS correspondent to Eretz Yisrael during the Begin years, during Camp David and all that. So he had some unbelievable stories. He said, "I didn't like any of Begin's positions, but I absolutely adored the man. He was the most interesting person I ever spent time with. I just adored him." Right? And he said, I wasn't a correspondent to Eretz Yisrael, I was a correspondent to Menachem Begin. That was my job. Just follow Begin around and see what he's got to say. Because he was just a fascinating person. When Sadat was killed, so Begin went to the funeral. The funeral was on Shabbos. So Begin stayed in a hotel on the route of the funeral, walked out of the hotel, went along the route for a while, then walked back to the hotel, because Begin was a Shem Shabbos. So Bob Simon was, now of course, Sadat had just been murdered. You can imagine the security around Menachem Begin at the funeral, right? So there was a ring around Begin. It was the sterile ring around Begin. And all the press was on the outside. So Begin sees Simon and he points to him and says, "Come in." So they let him into the ring. And he's walking on the street. He says, Begin used to walk with his hands behind his back like an old Jew. He's got his hand behind his back, a spitzer on Shabbos. He's going for a Shabbos walk. right? It's Sadat's funeral. And he's schmoozing with Bob Simon, and he turns to Simon and he says, in that accent of his, he always called him Mr. Simon. Mr. Simon, I'll bet you didn't think I was going to bury Sadat, did you? So he looks at her, he goes, whoa. Now, unfortunately, that's not what happened. Sadat buried him, because Camp David buried him, but whatever, that was his line. A tough old Jew. Okay, so in his test, the whole mimer changes, right? And we come to this whole new understanding of the two different levels of, again, they're not called this yet, but they will be, Kasis Lama'ar, and Mesiras Nefesh, and Kasis Lama'ar, right? That's all of Ois test. That's where we go, right? And we learn, the Rebbe explains at great length in the long paragraph on Kuf Lamed Hey, how the essential desire of a Yid is the revelation of the Eibishter. And if that's not happening, so then the Yid is Choleh, Gematria Memtes, right? Yeah?
Is this where we're quoting the Alter Rebbe, even though he was at the 49th level, it was still not enough?
Beautiful. It doesn't say exactly that, but the Alter Rebbe says, I don't want your Gan Eden, I don't want your Olam Haba, I want you. Yes. Right, that's where you quote. And the Rebbe says that that's in the Sinus Kerech, every single one of us, to get, it doesn't say mamish to that state yet, but to get to that place. Okay. That's Tess. In Ois Yud, so the Rebbe talks about the fact that Kasis Lama'ar is actually a higher level than the level of Mesiras Nefesh. And now the Rebbe talks about those, names those two levels that way, which we had understood up until now, but the Rebbe had never said it. That there's a level called Mesiras Nefesh, and there's a level called Kasis Lama'ar. And then the Rebbe opens us up to a whole new idea, that there's really three different levels, right? Three different levels of Kabbalah Torah. Here's where the Rebbe goes back to Kabbalah Torah to explain it in the two different levels in Purim, as opposed to Matan Torah. And now there's three different levels of connection to the Eibishter. There's the level of Matan Torah, which was what? Similar to Mazli Chazi, similar to seeing Elokus. Why? Kofaleim Harkegigis, the Eibishter held the mountain above our heads, which means what? A tremendous revelation, which for all intents and purposes left us no Bechir Chofshis. Okay? Fine, there's that level. Seeing Elokus, but that's an external event. That's the first level. Then there's the deeper level. That's the level of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama relative to the Mesiras Nefesh in Purim, which is a higher level of Kabbalah Torah. The Mesiras Nefesh that brought about a greater level of Kabbalah Torah. And that's coming from the Kasis of Golus producing a revelation of the Ma'or, and that revelation is Mesiras Nefesh. And what's the Kasis of Golus? The situation in Golus. That's the second level. And then there's the third level. This is all the all in Ois Yud. Then the third level is the level of Kasis Lamar, which produces the situation and the crushedness of the situation. Of the essential existence of Gullus, which is the second part of the story in Purim, the second level in Purim, and that's the level of Kasis Lamar. That's the level that is higher than Mesiras Nefesh. Okay, 1, 2, 3. All right. And we see people who have exhibited tremendous Mesiras Nefesh in certain situations, but then when they come out of that situation, it's not so, ein nikar behem is that language the Rebbe uses. It's not so recognized on them that they've experienced this, not only experienced, expressed this tremendous Mesiras Nefesh. Why? They revert back to where they were, right? Didn't bring about a long-term change in them, right? That doesn't mean that they didn't learn from the event. Obviously, they did, like everything that happens in life, but didn't bring about a tremendous change. So are they on that level now that there's no longer a need for that Mesiras Nefesh? No. And then there's other people who are on the level of Kasis Lamar even when they get out. And, it was clear the Rebbe was talking about Russia, right? When he's talking about the we see people. Well, who do we see? So we see the people who were in Russia and got out of Russia, right? So some of them stayed that way and some of them didn't. The people who didn't, they're bad people. Chas v'shalom. But why on the level of the other people, the Remendels, the Reberkas, those people? No. Okay, so that was Yud, and there the Rebbe talked about the two different levels of Etzem and Neshama, and therefore the two effects of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama. And that was a difficult part of the Maimer, the bottom of the long paragraph on page Kuf Lamed Vav. The Rebbe explains the effect of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama on the Keiches HaGiluyim, on the revealed powers of the soul, on the shiur, the character of the revealed powers of the soul, right? And the Rebbe explains that there can be a revelation of Etzem and Neshama that is, and the mashal we were using is like a ma'avar. It expresses itself through the revealed powers of the soul, such that the person's conscious behavior is a behavior of Mesiras Nefesh, right? That's certainly true, but it's not affecting the conscious aspects of the soul. They're simply like a ma'avar, right? What was the mashal of a ma'avar?
Like a phone's intellect versus our intellect from Mahavar.
Okay, so what was the ma'avar? What was the first one you said?
The phone's intellect.
Okay, the phone's lack of intellect, right? The
intellect.
fact that the phone will take the words from one place to another place and take them in their exact form, right? So there's no question if you can talk into the phone and those words will be passed, they'll be over to someone else. That's absolutely true. And the means of that is the phone, but the phone isn't affected in any way, shape, or form by that, though it's helping bring that about. Okay, but there's no islavshus. Okay, so the phone's the same phone after it brings a message of Chassidus from one person to another person. What about your seichel? So your seichel isn't the same. Once it's clothed in your seichel, so your seichel is now changed by virtue of this idea, and your seichel internalizes this idea, and when your seichel wants to give over this idea, it will give over the idea in your words. Now, your words have to be the idea, not your idea, the idea that you were taught, but you can say that in your words, right? Meaning you're not going to parrot back everything you heard from the teacher. You'll hopefully internalize and be able to explain it to someone else. Now, really, your words aren't what's important. The words that are important are the words that will be understood by the person you're saying it to. Now, you have to make sure, and this is extremely important, and all sorts of people have real issues with this, right? You have to make sure that when you're explaining to that person, you're explaining the idea that you heard and not your own idea. Now, you can explain your own idea, but don't say that this is what I heard in the class, because it's not. You're just saying your own vort. Right? Okay, fine. You want to say your own shtickle Torah, say your own shtickle Torah, but don't say that the teacher taught you that because he didn't. He taught you something else. Right? So we have to be very careful with our intellect. Hislavshus can be dangerous. Right? But it has to, it's mislavish in our seichel, and then we give it over in a slightly different form. Oh, okay, that's fine. That's the way Hislavshus works, because now it's become part of your seichel. Now, so your words are going to be words that you find comfortable to use to explain that idea, not your own idea, that idea. But you also have to make sure they're tailored to the person you're listening to. But you have to make sure that you're giving over the idea and not watering down the idea so it's unrecognizable, so you're not really teaching them what you learned. You're just teaching them something that you think they'll understand, but it has nothing to do with what you learned. Right? That's mashpia makabel relationship, and that's islavshus. Okay, so the first level of the revelation of Etzem and Neshama is like the ma'avar. The conscious powers become the vehicle for the expression of this essential connection to a Kadosh Baruch Hu, and it's unbelievably impressive, and the person is Meiser Nefesh. Okay, they live through that act of Mesiras Nefesh. Then what? So then they reach another state, hopefully. They reach another state where they're internalizing that expression of Etzem and Neshama, so it now becomes one with their Keiches HaGiluyim, with their revealed powers of the soul, and they are affected by the event. They've internalized the event and has a long-term effect, and they become one with that revelation, and that's the level of Chassidus and Likkutei Sichos, the Rebbe says, and that's and what was the language of the Rebbe? It affects the Keiches HaGiluyim of. It affects the shiur of the Keiches HaGiluyim, the character of the Keiches HaGiluyim. Right? That's what the Rebbe said. The end of Yud. Okay? Then the Rebbe explains the Indian V'yicho Elecha in Yud Aleph. What's V'yicho Elecha? That's our Veda. Going from the level of Mesiras Nefesh to the level of Chassidus Lamar. Meisha will take us to the level of Mesiras Nefesh. Meisha will nourish our Emunah and open us up to the etzem, the essential connection we have with the Eibishter. It's up to us to take it to the next level and internalize that so that becomes our conscious reality. That's up to us. That's our Veata. That's v'yichu alecha. And why does that bring about a Tesefes Or and Moshe? Well, because that's a greater expression of what Moshe is trying to do. That really is what Moshe is trying to do. When Moshe is connecting us to who we really are, what does he want to see from us? The Veata to take that to the next step. Just to enjoy the inspiration of the moment with Moshe, okay, so that's fine, but that's not what Moshe is interested in. Moshe wants you to internalize and become that. But that's you, it's not him. He, could he do that? Well, I mean, there are stories where Rebbe sort of looks at people and changes their lives, etc. Okay, but generally, he doesn't do that. He doesn't. He opens people up to who they really are and then says, okay, now go with this. Go change yourself. Right? That's Moshe. This is all Yud Aleph. And based on that, the Rebbe says we can understand the difference between Erev and Baker and their Talmud. Right? This is the last question that we had. That one thing that we did forget, I'm sorry, I apologize for forgetting, but in Ois Yud Aleph also the Rebbe talked about the two different levels of Ahavas Yisrael. The level of Ahavas Yisrael talked about in Tanya Perek Lamed Beis, and the level of Ahavas Yisrael which we brought about by a revelation of Etzem and Neshama, which is a much higher level, that the Jews will be connected not only at the level of Neshama but even the level of Guf, because every aspect of their existence will be connected to the Eibishter, therefore every aspect of their existence will be connected to every other Jew. Right? Okay. Whereas in Tanya, what does the Rebbe say? If you make your neshama ikr and your guf tafel, if you make your neshama the most important part and your guf secondary, so on that level you'll be able to connect to other Jews because mitzad your neshama you all have one Abba. Right? Okay. But then I have to make the guf secondary. Whereas if it's a revelation of etzem and neshama, even mitzad a guf, you're one with the yid because your essential being, every aspect of your essential being is connected to the Eibishter. Therefore, it's connected to every other Jew. Right? Okay. Then the Rebbe says the answer to our last question, what's the difference between Erev, a baker, and Ner Tamid? How do you reach Ner Tamid? That's Kosis Lamar. And what's that? That even in a state of baker, even when things are good, the Jew is still crushed by the essential existence of Golus, whereas Erev, a baker, that's the Jew who in a state of Erev, in a state of darkness, he expresses tremendous Mesiras Nefesh, but when the baker happens, so then the Mesiras Nefesh ends because there's no need for the Mesiras Nefesh. And then that state is, for all intents and purposes, again, the Lashon the Rebbe used was ein nikr by. It's not recognized in him that he was in such a state. He reverts back to basically who he was before. Okay, so that's the basic minor, right? And in Yud Beis, so the Rebbe ties it all up. There's the pshat of Veata tetzave, that Moshe should tell the Jewish people to bring him oil that he's going to give to Aaron to light the menorah. And then there's the panemius of it, that by virtue of Moshe connecting us, he gives us the Nesinas Kayach, he gives us the ability to do the next step, which is V'yichu Elecha, the step of reaching the state of Kasis Lama'ar. Moshe opens us up to what life is really all about. And what's life really all about? Revealing God in Elam Hazeh, not my own religiosity. That's very nice and very good and better than being a drunk. But that's not what life is about. Life is about God, not my religious state. Right? Even though I have to worry about my religious state. Well, how do I worry about my religious state best? By not worrying about it and worrying about what God wants. Then I'll have a great effect on my religious state. But the more I worry about my own religious state, the more I'll forget about God and worry about myself. And I'll be disconnected from Him. That doesn't mean I won't be doing good things. I'll be keeping Shabbos and eating kosher and doing all sorts of good things. But will that have anything to do with God? No, it'll be my own religiosity, my own upliftedness, my own spiritual growth. What's real spiritual growth? Not worrying about spiritual growth. Real spiritual growth is worrying about God. Right? A husband who's a good husband, what does he worry about all day? Being a good husband? No, he worries about his wife. He's not worried about being a good husband. He's worried about whether his wife has